Hey, what's up everybody? Ridiculously Citrageous here, coming to you with another epic gamer moment. Today we're going to be talking about a game that I've been playing since May 5th of 2013. Warframe is the only game I consistently come back to, and it's not without good reason. It's got a huge amount of content, it's got all sorts of crazy guns, melee weapons, it's got ninjas who play free, and if this is just not the best marketing campaign you've ever seen, you're wrong. You're lying to me. It's got a fun grind, an enjoyable gameplay loop, and insanely satisfying combat. You can customize every aspect of how you play, and it's got a fairly good story when the story is present. Warframe is also managed by one of the most bizarre and questionably competent or well-intentioned team of devs on the planet. The last point, it's not really the best thing, but it's like a train wreck. You can't really look away from it once it starts. You just want to see what happens. We'll talk about all of those points later. But what is Warframe itself? It's an instance multiplayer third-person shooter. It's not an MMORPG. Despite what some morons might want you to believe, it's not an MMO. Just because there are a bunch of people online doesn't make it an MMO. It is a third-person, instance-based shooter. Pretty important distinction. As we all know though, a business model can make or break your ability to enjoy a game. Warframe has one of the most fair business models I have seen in any game ever. It's right up there with Path of Exile. Nothing in the game besides cosmetics and armory slots are locked behind a paywall. The limitations free players face are insignificant. You can have 2 Warframes and 6 weapons to start out with for free. Realistically speaking, it's not too big of an issue if you have 2 Warframes you really like to play and 6 weapons you really like to use. There's not too much of a need to go outside of that, which is pretty fair. But in addition to this, you get 50 free platinum, which is the premium currency in Warframe, which you can unlock either 2 more Warframe slots or 4 more weapon slots, or a combination of both. Additionally, you can buy platinum from other players with items, mostly prime parts which you get from high-level missions, and you would literally never have to spend a single cent on this game. There's no power advantage you can get from spending real money in Warframe. Occasionally though, you are going to be able to skip some of the grind if you are willing to pay out premium currency. The store sells packs which will give you a set of weapons and cosmetics. Guaranteed, it's not a loot box or anything like that. These weapons are typically weapons that are hard to make or find. This may seem a bit unfair to those of us who like to work for our weapons. However, I would be lying if I said I didn't buy the Hunhow pack immediately when it came out, because I didn't want the war in 2 weeks, I wanted the war now. But nothing really happened to my character when I bought this. I got to decorate him, I got a new weapon, just like any other new weapon I would get normally. There's nothing that prevents a player who did not pay for it to get as strong as I did, and there's nothing to prevent a player who wants to sell their prime parts for platinum to get it without spending money, which is incredibly fair for a free-to-play game. Something that broaches the pay-to-win line for some people is that when you buy a weapon with the premium currency, you bypass the mastery rank requirements that you can equip it at. So you can equip it at an earlier level than a player who didn't spend the money for it. These aren't weapons that are stronger because of the mastery rank they require. They generally are there to promote you using other weapons and leveling up and doing the mastery rank stuff. So it's not really that big of an issue. Some weapons that are high mastery rank are actually kind of crappy. The premium currency can also be used to instantly craft instead of waiting 12 or 24 hours, but this is generally regarded as a huge waste of money. All that being said, 99.9% of the uses for platinum are cosmetic. There are items to add to your Warframe, there are new skins, you can pay actual real money for community developed skins. In terms of color customization, you will get a free base palette that's pretty limited, but they'll also give you a couple seasonal palettes, and everything else you're going to have to buy with platinum. But, like I said, if you want to sell your prime parts for platinum and then go buy cosmetics, you can very well do that. Nothing is stopping you, nothing prevents that. Warframe has very fair, non-exploitative, non-loot box monetizations, which is going to make you glad you're spending money on the game. It doesn't feel like you're forced to, it doesn't feel like a gambling thing. It feels like, this game's really fun, and I want to support it. And you know, Warframe's a free-to-play game. You don't even have to pay money to play it. You don't have to. As I've said before, it's kind of pointless to talk about graphics in a video format, unless you're talking about the technical aspects of what's going on or the system requirements. So I'm just going to talk about the system requirements and some of the issues with the graphics before I move on to talking about the art style. System requirements are crazy low. I used to play this game on an HP Pavilion laptop and I still got like 60 FPS with no issues. But now I'm playing on an R9 390 and I've got everything cranked to max and it doesn't even take a performance hit. I can record and play this game at the same time with no capture card or external computer capturing anything, and I take 0 performance hit. It is incredibly well optimized. An issue with the graphics is sometimes it has a tendency to get way too bright and way too flashy, so playing will occasionally be like watching a flashbang go off and you won't have any idea what is happening. And that can lead to a couple frustrating deaths, and it's especially frustrating when you're doing so well and then you literally cannot see what is going on because of everything that's happening on screen, and then you die. It's not really a huge issue. It's only killed me a couple times in the 700-ish hours I'm going to assume I've played of this game. So it's not really that terrible of a deal, but that is something to be aware of. So you might want to tweak your graphics settings if that's something you're worried about. A consistent art style and aesthetic is very important to establishing a consistent tone and feeling in your video game, and this is something Warframe does exceptionally well. Each weapon looks like it comes from a particular faction, but none of them look like they shouldn't exist in the same universe, and this extends to all sorts of faction design, the character design, the enemy design. Everything looks like it works together in the universe despite being distinct and unique. Even at a glance, if you look at a Corpus weapon versus a Grineer weapon, you can very clearly see the difference, but they don't really look like they should be in two separate universes. They look like they can coexist. Like the Jat Katag, it is a rocket hammer. It is crude, it is ugly, it is a mustard color, and that represents the Grineer very well. They're mustard people, and that's
exactly what I'm trying to say right now.
But the Grineer are crude and violent and just brutal. The Corpus are more focused on mining and merchant operations, so a lot of their weapons look like mining equipment, or they are mining equipment. It just looks like it's something that would come from the Corpus. The Orokin didn't really do much fighting by themselves. They used the Warframes to do that, so their ceremonial prime weapons, they prioritize form over function. They don't look like weapons you would actually reasonably use every day because of how ornate and ceremonial they look. And the Infested, while they don't actually use weapons themselves for the most part, the weapons that are made from infested parts look like they're made from infested parts, and you can infer the grossness just by looking at this weapon. But putting all 4 of these weapons on the screen, they don't look like they all came from a separate universe. They all look like they can exist simultaneously in the same place. And that is good game design right there. The Grineer look very big and brutish, and that's because they live in very hostile places, and they also need to supplement their bodies because their genome is degrading at a very quick rate, according to the lore. So they need a bunch of other things to basically keep them alive and keep them protected on the hostile planets which they inhabit. There's regional variants where they have different color armors, and it makes them seem like they're one big military. Also, the Grineer, much like the Vietnam-era US, loves chemical weapons, just like they love killing people who can't defend themselves. So there are a couple units which use these chemical weapons, and they look like they are outfitted to properly use these crude chemical weapons the Grineer came up with. It goes a long way to establishing a consistent feeling in the universe. Whereas you look at Corpus, they're not big and buff, and they mostly fight by proxy. The most powerful Corpus units are pretty much consistently robots. You have the MOAs, all different types, you have the Bursas, and the Corpus don't really do all the fighting for themselves. Some of them just come at you with like a beating stick because they're not really focused on combat. Their robots are, which is awesome because in the story they're not warlords. They use robots for protection and combat. The Infested are just gross and you hate them for existing because they're breathing your same air, and it's awful and you will just absolutely detest them. But when you see these factions interacting, it doesn't make you uncomfortable. All these things look like they can belong to the same world, and they look like they are reasonably able to interact and have conflict. It feels like a living, breathing world. When you're invading a Grineer ship with a group of Corpus, yeah, you know these Corpus guys are assholes, but when you see the Corpus fighting the Grineer, you don't have any sort of weird disconnect between those two things. It looks completely natural. Pretty much every weapon or item you see is a weapon or item you can get in the game, provided you're willing to go the mile to get it. Even though there's over 300 weapons, and I know that's very overwhelming, you can get each one if you want to. While it's not feasible to own all the weapons simultaneously because you do need to buy extra armory slots if you want to do that, but it is feasible to have at least 2 sets of weapons you really enjoy using that are also effective because of how the progression system works. Just about any weapon or Warframe you find or want to play can be modified to the point where it's useful. It might not be the optimal thing for every situation, and it might not be optimal at all. Warframe doesn't require you to play what's optimal though. You can play whatever you have fun with, provided you're willing to modify your weapons appropriately to be good enough to use. There are very few weapons in Warframe that are unusable. There are plenty of weapons that aren't going to be the best, but if you modify them and put the time in, they're going to be good and they can carry you to whatever content you want to do. But if you want to min-max and do things like that, you're able to go get a very strong weapon and absolutely break it to the point where it is just a tool of
Unbridled cosmic genocide.
So there's something for everybody. The casual player can make things work however they want them to work and do whatever they want, and the min-maxer can go on a 4-hour T4 void survival, but that's all according to how you want to play. You don't have to play super hardcore or super casual, you can play anywhere in between. Because of how Warframe's progression works, you can prioritize getting a bunch of Warframes first, making them very strong and not really relying on your weapons too much. Or you can focus completely on weapons, where your Warframe doesn't really do much outside of a occasional heal or CC ability, but your weapons can pretty much destroy anything you want to destroy. There's going to be certain weapons that are going to be better for certain tasks. However, you never get pigeonholed into feeling like you have to do that. There's no one way required to do anything in Warframe. Warframes are pretty much the same as weapons are in regards of effectiveness. You're not going to want to pick a healer like Trinity or Oberon to do all your damage, just like you're not going to want to pick a damage dealer like Mesa or Excalibur to do all your healing. It just doesn't make sense. Mods are pretty much where all the customization in Warframe comes from. In some scenarios, mods come down to things like making numbers go higher so your guns do more damage so you can kill enemies faster. Other times, it can make your double-barreled shotgun shoot 5 shots in a row. Sometimes it can make your flamethrower penetrate through walls and give everybody on the ship radiation poisoning and make them shoot each other in the face. You can even change how your melee weapon swings with mods. There's also the addition of Riven mods, which are mods that only work for certain guns, but have random stat boosts. You can combine elements to make new effects, you can add more elements on top of that for multiple effects, or you can just focus on getting one specific damage type stupidly high to abuse that effect. Mods come in the form of cards with various rarities and polarities, and weapons come with different polarity slots. If you can match a card polarity to a polarity slot, the mod only uses half the energy it normally would. Weapons have a max of 30 energy to be spent on mods, so putting mods in the right places is very important to maximize how much you get out of it. In terms of polarity slots, you can also change each slot with a rare item called a Forma, which resets the weapon level to 0 but adds a polarity slot or changes one to one of your choosing. To further increase this energy cap is an Orokin Catalyst or Orokin Reactor, which doubles the amount of mod energy a weapon or Warframe can have from 30 to 60. The same type of modding can also be done to Warframes. You can make glass cannon bullshit, kill everything on the ship in one hit builds, or you can make your Warframe an unassailable fortress with so much health, armor, and shields that nothing can touch it. But that is completely up to you with what you're doing. Sure, you can make Excalibur a tank and not worry about damage or energy efficiency or anything like that. Is it going to be the most effective thing in the world? Is he going to be the best Warframe to make a tank? Probably not. But can you do it? Absolutely. Nothing's going to stop you. So now we're on to the actual playing of the game. I'm not going to explain every piece of gameplay or mechanics because there is a stupidly large amount of things in this game. So it's probably a better idea if you hear something you think you'd enjoy to go try it, but I will cover as much as I can reasonably. Just something to cover briefly. Kubrow's, Kavats, and Archwing. Kubrow's and Kavats are pets. You can raise them. They have random colors. They can do things like dig up ammo, distract enemies. They can do damage, things like that. Archwing is something that was added a while ago. It is space combat in zero gravity. So you fly around in a suit called an Archwing, and you have a big gun and a big sword with its own unique abilities. And you fly around inside broken ships or outside of large capital ships, and you complete mission objectives. This is not anything indicative of like actual normal gameplay. Archwing is fun. It's not really fleshed out fully, but it is something neat to do sometimes. Missions only take about 5 minutes, so it's not like it's a big time investment either. There's also Planes of Eidolon, and if I went into depth in that, that could be like a whole video in and of itself, so I would recommend going and looking at the DE official video about Planes of Eidolon and seeing if that's something that might interest you. It is not the core of the gameplay. It is an open world addition to Warframe. It's a very big open space for you to play and kill big bosses and high level enemies, but it's not the core gameplay loop, which is what I'm going to try to cover and talk about. So like I said, there's a bunch of mechanics, so I'm going to kind of break this down into little subsections. Warframe has a very robust movement system, and though it doesn't feel like that at the start, it actually starts you off with all the tools you need for the entire game in terms of movement. You just have to learn how to use them. There are a couple tutorials in the game, but to really learn how to chain these things together and how to move better and move more efficiently is something that you'll learn by playing. That adds to the sense of player progression, because at the beginning of the game you feel all clumsy, you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. You're going to fly off the edge of a map, you're going to fly into a group of enemies you weren't really prepared to be fighting, but by the time you're doing high level missions, you're flipping around, you're flying through the air, bullet time, shooting a guy in the head, landing behind this other guy, cutting his fucking head off, shit like that. And you feel like a badass. You feel like you went from weenie to badass. It's so rewarding to finally get to that point where you're jumping between columns and hanging on the walls and shooting down at people. One gripe I do have with the parkour system is some walls look like they can be jumped on and clung to, but they can't. Some walls are supposed to be climbable, it looks like, but they're not because they have slight overhangs, which fucks up the whole system. And while this isn't something that's going to ruin your enjoyment of the game, when you try to do it for the first time and it doesn't work, it's going to be kind of shitty. You can be like, what the fuck? And if you're trying to get away from something, or you're trying to move fast, or you're on kind of a time crunch to do something, and something you think is supposed to work or is going to work doesn't, it's kind of a bad feeling. It'll only happen once or twice before you get used to it. It's still not the most fun thing in the world, but that is a bit of a nitpick, and I don't think it's indicative of the overall quality of the parkour system, because the parkour system is really fun. There are a bunch of different mission types in Warframe. I'm not going to talk about all of them because that's enough content for one video by itself, but I am going to give you some mechanics of some of the mission types. You've got Assassination, where you go onto a faction ship or planet and you kill an enemy boss with different mechanics. Capture, where you hunt down and detain an enemy, then get them to Extraction. Hijack has you escorting a large item on a track to Extraction while it is draining your shields and you're defending it from enemies. Interception is interesting because it's got 4 capture points and you have to capture enough points and hold them to decode a message before the enemy faction does. This is also an infinite game mode. There are stealth missions like Spy, where you have to avoid setting off alarms, otherwise the data that you're trying to get will get purged. There's also raids, which Warframe calls trials, where you do a succession of missions and then go fight a boss at the end to get rewards. This is not all of the mission types. There are way more. They're all different enough to be fresh and new feeling when you play them, but also they're short enough and quick enough where you don't get tired of them as you're playing. Warframe missions typically take about 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes they can take up to 15 if you're doing a spy mission really carefully. And then you've got infinite missions too if you just want to play for like an hour or two. Don't have to make any huge time commitment when you're playing a Warframe mission because you have plenty of options. The level design in Warframe, except for the story missions, is going to be random. However, the way it randomly generates these levels is through a tile set, and each of these tile sets can have tiles that are very large, that have a lot of verticality, and have a lot of things you can do in them in terms of what you can use as choke points, what you can use to your advantage, what you should look out for. So when these tiles get randomly combined, it's not like it's just throwing you a hallway. Warframe sets itself apart from the other space magic / space weird fantasy shit with its abilities. Your Warframe has a set of magic space abilities which will do a wide range of things, from healing or throwing shuriken or mind control to more bizarre things like a disco ball of death, being able to absorb enemy attacks, or things like releasing toxic spores that latch onto enemies, then explode, then latch onto more enemies. This might be a good time for a montage. You can further customize these abilities with mods which can fundamentally change how you use an ability. These are called augments. While there's no set role a Warframe has, some are going to be better for certain tasks than others. For example, a Frost would be better at defending a static target than he would be at an escort mission because his snow globes don't move. And Trinity is going to be better at keeping everybody alive than an Excalibur, because Excalibur doesn't have any healing abilities. But if you want to do a mission where you need to do a high amount of damage in a short amount of time, you probably don't want to just have Trinity with you. You might want to pick someone like Mesa. Like I just said though, you don't have to play like this. You don't have to make these particular decisions. You can many times make a Warframe do something it's not exactly optimized for, as long as you want to make it do that and you're willing to put in the time. Because Warframe doesn't lock you into something and allows you to play around with how you want to play each of your Warframes, it can give you new appreciation for abilities and how they interact with each other and the world and how each Warframe can function when not built for its optimal purpose. It can lead to a lot more enjoyment of the content because you can do it pretty much in any way you want as long as you're willing to think about it enough to make it work. So I know I'm riding this game's dick pretty hard, but there are some other issues I'd like to talk about with the combat and gameplay. When things get hectic, because of how the graphics engine works, sometimes it's very hard to see, and if you can't see, you can't properly react, and there are going to be at least a few unjustifiable deaths because you literally could not see what was going on. And not because an enemy blinded you or there was something that disabled you, but because the screen was so bright with all the effects and 40 guys shooting at you and all the Warframe abilities going off that you could not see what was happening. I'm also going to talk about DE as a studio real quick. It seems to be a even split 50-50 between really good employees and total fucking dickheads. You have people like Rebecca, who is an amazing community leader, who is fun, who interacts with fans and the community really well and does a great job. And you have people like who, when they added a feature that was akin to gambling, and you could pretty much just pull this lever over and over again and get new skins and colors for your Kavat or Kubro, he decided, we're taking this out, that's not what we wanted to do, and they got rid of it within 2 days. Even though it was insanely profitable, that's not how they wanted to monetize their game. You also have people who, when called out about lying, they attempted to get the person calling them out in legal trouble. It was some situation where some mods released, and they were said to have a certain drop rate. Someone went in, data mined, and found they didn't have that drop rate, and when he brought it up, DE said, oh shit, sorry, that's our bad, let me go fix that. They fixed it, supposedly. When he data mined again and looked at those same numbers, they still weren't what DE said they were. And he called them out a second time and they threatened to sue him. You know, legally speaking, I'm not sure what kind of grounds they had to actually do that. However, as a company that is supposed to get trust from its community to continue getting money from that community, that is a dumb as fuck thing to do, and all you had to do was just not lie. You could say, yeah, the drop rate's really tiny, we're keeping them that way, and not lie about raising them, because that's just dumb as fuck. DE can make some very questionable decisions, like Archwing I was talking about earlier. They kind of just added that, didn't really flesh it out, and then just left it there. Warframe's strongest aspect certainly is not the story, but it would be criminal for me not to talk about it because it is off the rails all the time. The voice acting is laughable 90% of the time, and the other 10% is actually pretty fucking good and compelling, even if it is the most edgy shit I have ever heard. This game is so edgy. You wouldn't be able to tell just from the gameplay, you know, just a typical murder simulator. But the story, oh my gosh, you could cut yourself if you're not careful. But that's not to say that the quest lines don't have very compelling stories, because they do. The second Dream Quest is one of the best things I've ever played in a free-to-play game. It was interesting, it kept me captivated, and I felt a legitimate sense of danger the entire time I was playing it. I felt outnumbered, I felt outgunned and outmatched, I felt like I had fucked up. Rebecca plays Lotus and she just talks in her normal voice. It's very strange when I sit down to watch a community stream and I see Rebecca and I hear, I'm like, that's Lotus. And then I go sit down and play Warframe and I listen to Lotus, I'm like, that's Rebecca, what the fuck? It is really uncomfortable, but it is so weird that it's almost charming that DE just made this decision and then stuck with it. For a general setup to the story, it's your typical sci-fi shit. There are bad guys. You have the Grineer, who are space Floridians who operate on Hitler's ideals and legitimate mental illness for the goal of destroying all non-Grineer things in the galaxy because they are massive fucking douchebags. You have the Corpus, who are greedy merchant douchebags where the lower class are little more than slaves to the rich, which obviously makes them massive fucking douchebags. Then you have the Infested, and they're just really fucking gross, and you look at them and you say, wow, I hate you because you're breathing the same air as I do, and then you just fucking murder them because they are awful and gross, and they want to make all things infested, and you just don't want to be infested because they're fucking disgusting. You play as a space ninja who, after being woken up by this big titty space MILF, is told go kill untold millions of people because they're massive fucking douchebags. The story is not the main focus of Warframe. It's something to enjoy in addition to the awesome gunplay and combat and movement system and all the infinite customizability that you have. The story is just there to be something fun to do extra. And while it is ridiculous all the time, it's still fun while it's there. When you're told some of the things you're told, you're gonna sit there and say, all right, certainly, fucking bravo, sir, I certainly fucking believe that. Yes, and you're just on the roller coaster ride and you get to enjoy it. So one of my friends brought it to my attention while they were watching an early draft of this video that it sounds like I'm ragging on this story a lot more than I actually am. But let me make something real clear. When I say this story is fucking ridiculous, I mean that in a good way. I mean that in the way that it does so many weird and unexpected things that whoever is writing for DE must be smoking something past crack on a daily fucking basis because of how wild this shit gets. There's just so much that goes on at once and you think about it and you're like, what in the fuck is going on right now? What is happening? What the fuck is happening? I enjoy that. The voice acting, I'm not saying that Rebecca is a bad voice actor. What I'm saying is, it is Rebecca talking in her normal ass voice.
It's the Grineer.
None of the game, except for like, I think 2 characters are professionally voice acted. They just grab random motherfuckers out of the office and be like, hey, you want to voice act a character? And everyone's like, sure. And that's what makes Warframe kind of feel like a passion project in that regard, that they do shit like this, and it's really neat. The entire concept of Warframe is just like, okay, space ninjas, extragalactic aliens, big titty MILF, genocide ninjas, alright, cool, whatever. Fucking put that shit in there. And it's fun. It's good fun. I'm not gonna lie, I quote this game. My friends fucking quote this game all the time. Just listen to this.
Now, let me show you the future, Zanuka. Kill!
Tell me you don't want to say it over and over again. Or who could forget Mr. fucking Potato Head? This asshole is just a head who flies around onto mech bodies. Why? Why? Why does this happen? I have literally only ever experienced shit that's this ridiculous in Warframe, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to be an asshole about this, I promise. I really do like it. So who's going to be interested in playing this game? If you're looking for something story-driven or something with a bunch of lore, you're not going to want to play this game for that reason alone. Like I said, you're going to want to enjoy the story in addition to the fun gameplay. The gameplay is the main focus of the game, though. It's not the story, it's not the lore. The main focus is getting really strong and cutting motherfuckers' heads off. That is the fun part, and that is the core gameplay. If you want something super customizable and super open-ended for you to play in between other games, I'd highly recommend it. You can easily sink 100 hours into this game without even trying, because it's that kind of addicting, fun gameplay loop, and I would highly recommend it, especially with the business model. It's free to play, and if you like it a lot, you can spend money to support DE when they're making good decisions. Do not waste money on this game. Play Warframe instead. If you think you want to play this game, don't. Play Warframe instead. It is way better. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you know more now than you did before, and thank you for watching.